Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of Orbital Station Alpha, watching the last Coalition transport ships disappear into the black void of space. Their blue engine trails faded like dying stars, taking with them humanity's final hope of salvation. Below her, Earth spun slowly in its death spiral. The planet that had given birth to humanity now looked sick and wounded. Brown clouds covered most of the continents where green forests once grew. The oceans had turned an ugly gray color. The solar anomaly had been eating away at Earth's atmosphere for 3 years now, and everyone knew the planet had maybe 6 months left before it became completely dead. "Admiral, the final count is in," said Lieutenant Commander Marcus Torres, her chief engineer. His voice was quiet and tired. 30 million humans still on the surface. The Coalition ships left with their cargo holds only half full. Sarah closed her eyes and felt the weight of those numbers. 30 million people. Men, women, children, elderly grandparents, babies who had just learned to walk. All abandoned. All left to die. What was their reason this time? She asked, though she already knew the answer would make her angry. Torres read from his tablet, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. Official statement from Coalition Command. Evacuation parameters have been adjusted. Coalition resources must be preserved for more viable species. Humanity's integration probability index has been recalculated as insufficient for continued support. Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it, just bitter, cold anger. Viable species. Integration probability index. They make it sound like a math problem. She had known the Etherians, Nexari, and Vorthans for 15 years. When the solar anomaly first appeared, they had promised to help. The elegant Etherians, with their flowing robes and silver skin, had spoken beautiful words about brotherhood between the stars. The Nexari, with their computer-like minds and metal implants, had calculated exactly how many ships would be needed to save everyone. The ancient Vorthans, proud warriors who claimed to protect the weak, had sworn mighty oaths of protection. "All lies, Admiral. We're getting emergency signals from the surface," reported Communications Officer Lisa Park. "Refugee camps in Australia, South America, and Africa are asking when the next evacuation ships will arrive." Sarah's hands tightened into fists. "What do I tell them, Park? That their alien friends decided they weren't worth saving? That 3 species who claimed to be civilized just wrote off 30 million people like a bad business deal?" The truth was, Sarah had seen this coming. Over the past 6 months, the Coalition evacuations had become slower and more selective. First, they said they could only take healthy adults, then only those with useful skills, then only those who could pay for passage. Finally, they had stopped coming at all. The Etherians said we were too emotional, Torres said quietly. The Nexari calculated that humans would be too difficult to integrate into Coalition society. The Vorthans claimed we would be too aggressive for their peaceful alliance. "Peaceful?" Sarah repeated. "The same Vorthans who conquered 12 star systems in the last century. The same ones who turn entire populations into slave labor. But we're too aggressive." She walked to the command console and activated the station's long-range communications array. If this was going to be humanity's final message to the galaxy, she wanted it to be heard clearly. "Torres, gather all department heads in the briefing room. Park, I want you to record everything I'm about to say and transmit it on all Coalition frequencies. I want every ship, every station, every colony to hear this." "Yes, ma'am." Sarah took a deep breath and began to speak. Her voice was calm and clear, but underneath was the promise of something dangerous. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force, speaking from Orbital Station Alpha. Today, the Galactic Coalition has shown the galaxy who they really are. They promised to evacuate all humans from our dying world. They lied. 30 million people remain on Earth's surface, abandoned by the species they trusted to save them." She paused, looking down at the brown and gray world below. Somewhere down there, families were huddling together, waiting for rescue ships that would never come. "The Coalition says we are not viable. They say we cannot be integrated. They say we are too dangerous for their perfect society. They may be right about that last part. Today they have made 30 million people into enemies. They have turned humanity's greatest hope into its greatest rage." Torres appeared at her shoulder, holding a data pad with technical readouts. Sarah glanced at it and nodded. The numbers showed what she had hoped to see. Orbital Station Alpha was not just a military base. It was a construction facility, Earth's greatest shipyard, and it was still fully operational. "The Coalition thinks this is the end of humanity's story," Sarah continued her broadcast. They think they can leave us here to die quietly while they go back to their comfortable lives. They are wrong. This is not our ending. This is our beginning. She gestured to Torres, who activated the station's external sensors. On the main screen, dozens of images appeared. Salvage ships, mining vessels, construction platforms, and military escorts. All human-crewed, all still operational. All now officially abandoned by their former allies. We have tools. We have ships. We have the knowledge they shared with us when they thought we would be grateful pets. Most importantly, we have 30 million people who now know exactly what the Coalition really thinks of them. We have been forged in fire and abandoned in space. That makes us something new, something they have never seen before. She ended the recording and turned to Torres. How long until Earth's atmosphere becomes completely toxic? 6 months, maybe 7 if we're lucky. Then we have 6 months to strip this world of everything useful. Every piece of metal, every computer, every tool, every weapon. If they want to abandon us, we'll take everything we can carry. Over the next few weeks, Sarah watched as humanity began the greatest salvage operation in history. Ships that had been designed to carry people to new homes were converted into massive cargo haulers. Factories that had been shut down for evacuation were fired up again to build supplies for the journey ahead. The Coalition sent a few messages asking about the increased activity, but Sarah ignored them. Let them wonder. Let them worry. They had made their choice when they left 30 million humans to die. But the most important thing happening was not on Earth or in orbit. It was in the hearts and minds of every human who learned about the abandonment. Children who had dreamed of exploring the stars with their Coalition friends now learned that those friends had left them to suffocate. Adults who had trusted alien promises now understood that trust was a luxury they could no longer afford. Sarah received reports from human settlements throughout Coalition space. Humans who had already been evacuated were facing new restrictions and suspicions. Some were being relocated to less desirable worlds. Others found their jobs and opportunities suddenly limited. The Coalition was making it clear that humans were no longer welcome partners, but barely tolerated refugees. They're making it easy for us, Torres observed during one of their planning meetings. Every human in the galaxy now knows exactly where they stand. Sarah nodded. Fear makes people do stupid things. The Coalition is afraid of what we might become, so they're making sure we become exactly that. The final evacuation from Earth happened not with Coalition ships, but with human vessels. Every person who could be saved was loaded onto ships that had been jury-rigged for the journey. They could not save everyone, but they saved as many as possible. The rest went to emergency shelters deep underground, hoping to survive until rescue could come. As Sarah's ship lifted off from Earth for the final time, she watched the planet shrink in the view screen. Somewhere down there, millions of people were still fighting to survive in the poisoned air. Some would make it to the underground shelters, others would not. Where do we go now? Asked Torres. Sarah smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Nowhere the Coalition will think to look. We're going to find every hidden asteroid, every dead system, every forgotten corner of space. We're going to learn how to survive where no one else can. And then when we're strong enough, we're going to remind the galaxy what happens when you abandon 30 million humans to die. Behind them, Earth continued its slow death spiral, but humanity was no longer dying with it. They were becoming something new. Something harder, something the Coalition would regret creating. The abandoned were about to become the hunters. 23 years had passed since the Great Abandonment, and humanity had learned to live in the spaces between the stars where no civilized species dared to go. The dead Kepler system, with its burned-out star and lifeless rocks, had become home to nearly 1 million humans living in converted asteroids and makeshift space stations. Marcus Torres, now Admiral Torres, stood in the command center of Haven Station, built inside a hollow asteroid that had once been a Nexari mining operation. The alien equipment had been stripped out years ago and replaced with human engineering that was brutal, efficient, and designed to work in places where failure meant death. Report, he said to Captain Elena Vasquez, who had just returned from a raid on a Coalition supply convoy. 3 freighters carrying medical supplies and rare metals, she said, pulling off her helmet and shaking out her dark hair. No casualties on our side. Coalition escort ships arrived 40 minutes too late, just like we calculated. Elena was typical of the new generation of humans. Born in the year of abandonment, she had grown up in asteroid bases and salvage ships. She could pilot a fighter through a debris field that would kill most Coalition pilots, fix a life support system with spare parts and wire, and fight hand-to-hand in zero gravity. The Coalition called people like her feral remnants. She called herself a survivor. Any word from the other strike teams? Torres asked. Captain Rodriguez hit a Vorthon, munitions depot near the Centauri trade route. Captain Kim's group disabled 3 Etherian research stations in the outer rim, all teams reporting successful operations and no losses. Torres nodded with satisfaction. The hit-and-run tactics were working perfectly. Humanity had spent 2 decades learning every weakness in Coalition technology, every gap in their patrol routes, every mistake in their security systems. They had become ghosts, striking from nowhere and vanishing before anyone could respond. But the most important thing they had learned was how to survive in places the Coalition considered impossible to live. The dead systems, the asteroid fields, the regions of space where cosmic radiation made electronics unreliable, and life support systems failed. Humans had adapted to all of it. "Sir," said Lieutenant Park, the daughter of the communications officer who had served with Admiral Chen. "We're receiving a transmission from the Nomad fleet. Admiral Chen wants to speak with you." The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the UES Defiance, Admiral Chen's flagship. Chen looked older now, her hair completely gray and her face marked with scars from a Vorthon plasma burst 3 years earlier. But her eyes still burned with the same anger that had driven her to lead humanity into exile. "Marcus," she said, "how are our new friends settling in?" Torres smiled. The new friends were the Zephyrians, a species of 6-limbed traders who had been enslaved by the Vorthon Empire for the past century. Humanity had freed them from a prison colony 6 months ago, and they had proven to be valuable allies. "They're adapting well to our methods," Torres replied. "Turns out they're excellent at sabotage operations. Their natural ability to change skin color makes them perfect for infiltration missions." "Good. What about the Krill?" The Krill were another species that had been abandoned by the Coalition. Insectoid creatures with natural armor and incredible strength, they had been written off as too primitive for civilized society. Humanity had found them living in the ruins of their homeworld and offered them a place in the growing alliance of the discarded. "They're proving to be excellent engineers," Torres said. "Their understanding of hive mind coordination is helping us design better ship systems. And they're absolutely deadly in boarding actions." Chen nodded approvingly. "The Coalition thinks they're so smart, dividing the galaxy into worthy and unworthy species. They never considered what would happen if all the unworthy ones decided to work together. This was humanity's greatest discovery. They were not the only species the Coalition had abandoned. Across the galaxy, dozens of races had been deemed unsuitable for various reasons. Too aggressive, too primitive, too independent, too different. The Coalition wanted allies who would follow orders and never ask difficult questions. Humanity had begun finding these abandoned species and offering them something the Coalition never had: acceptance without conditions. The alliance that grew from this was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. It was not based on fear or dominance, but on mutual survival and shared anger at their abandonment. "What's our current force strength?" Chen asked. 47 ships of various sizes plus support vessels," Torres replied. "About 15,000 humans in fighting condition, and another 8,000 from our allied species. We're not big enough to fight the Coalition fleet directly, but we're more than enough to make their lives very difficult." "Good, because I just received some interesting intelligence from our sources inside Coalition space." The screen changed to show a star map with several systems highlighted in red. Torres recognized them as major Coalition industrial centers and military bases. "Our human assets in Coalition space are reporting increased security measures and mobilization of fleet elements," Chen continued. "It seems our activities have finally gotten their attention. They're starting to take us seriously." Torres felt a surge of satisfaction. For 20 years, humanity had been dismissed as a minor nuisance. Pirates and scavengers who would eventually fade away or be hunted down. The Coalition had been wrong about that, just like they had been wrong about everything else concerning humanity. "There's more," Chen said. "We've made contact with human populations in the Coalition core worlds. Turns out our former allies have been making life increasingly difficult for any humans who stayed behind. Restricted jobs, limited housing, constant surveillance. They're essentially creating a slave class." "How many are we talking about?" Roughly 50 million humans scattered across Coalition space. Most of them are ready to leave, but they need help getting out. Torres felt his pulse quicken. 50 million humans. If they could be freed from Coalition control and brought into the Alliance, humanity's strength would triple overnight. "What are you thinking?" he asked. Chen's smile was sharp and dangerous. "I'm thinking it's time to stop hiding in the shadows. The Coalition wants to treat us like criminals and terrorists. Fine. Let's show them what real criminals and terrorists can do." Over the next few months, humanity's strategy changed completely. Instead of small raids on remote outposts, they began targeting major Coalition infrastructure. Power stations went dark. Communication networks crashed. Trade routes became dangerous as human raiders struck without warning and disappeared into the void. But the most devastating attacks were not against ships or stations. They were against the Coalition's reputation. Human hackers, many of them former Coalition IT workers who had been reassigned to menial jobs, began broadcasting the truth about the great abandonment to every screen in Coalition space, the carefully edited version of events that the Coalition had been telling for 20 years was replaced with the real recordings. Admiral Chen's final broadcast. Video of Coalition ships leaving Earth with half-empty cargo holds. Audio recordings of Coalition leaders discussing which species were worth saving and which could be safely abandoned. The effect was immediate and devastating. Many Coalition member species had never known the full truth about what happened to humanity. They had been told that humanity had chosen to stay on Earth, or that the evacuation had been completed successfully. Learning that the Coalition had deliberately abandoned 30 million people to die caused massive political upheaval. Some species demanded investigations. Others withdrew from Coalition operations in protest. A few even began secretly providing aid to human operations, smuggling supplies and information to the growing human alliance. "The Coalition is fracturing," reported Captain Kim during a strategy meeting on Haven Station. "Our sources indicate that at least 6 member species are reconsidering their membership. The Etherians are facing massive protests on their homeworld. Even some Nexari are questioning the logic of their leadership's decisions." Elena Vasquez, now promoted to colonel, added her own observations. "Their military responses are becoming more desperate too. They're using heavier weapons and targeting civilian populations. Yesterday, a Vorthon patrol ship destroyed a human refugee transport that was clearly marked as non-combatant." Torres felt the familiar burn of anger in his chest. The Coalition was showing its true face now that they were being challenged. Behind all their talk of civilization and peace, they were still the same species that had left 30 million humans to suffocate in Earth's poisoned atmosphere. "How many humans did we lose?" he asked quietly. 237, Elena replied, including 43 children. The command center fell silent. Every person there had lost family and friends to Coalition actions over the years. Some had been killed in the original abandonment. Others had died in the labor camps and restricted zones where humans were forced to live in Coalition space. Still others had been disappeared by Coalition. "Security forces for asking too many questions, sir," said Lieutenant Park. "We're receiving a priority transmission from Admiral Chen." Chen's face appeared on the screen again, but this time she was not alone. Behind her stood representatives from a dozen different species. Humans, Zephyrians, Krill, and others that Torres did not recognize. Marcus. Captain Elena Vasquez crouched in the ventilation shaft above the Nexari research facility on Kepler Prime, listening to the steady hum of alien computers processing data. She had been infiltrating Coalition installations for 5 years now, but this mission was special. Today she was going to hit them where it really hurt. "Phoenix team. Report status," she whispered into her throat microphone. "Charges set on the main power coupling," came the voice of Sergeant Mills, a human who had grown up in the asteroid fields and could move through zero gravity like he was born there. "Ready to blow on your signal. Tiger team in position at the communication array," reported Lieutenant Zhao, whose parents had been among the 30 million abandoned on Earth. "We've got their entire network mapped and ready for our little surprise." Elena smiled grimly. The surprise was a virus that would not just crash the Nexari computer systems, but would replace every screen in the facility with images from Earth's final days. Pictures of children choking on poisoned air while Coalition ships flew away with empty cargo holds. Videos of humans building their own rescue ships from scrap metal because their alien allies had abandoned them. Wolf Team, what's your status on the detention level? She asked. 23 human prisoners secured and ready for extraction, came the voice of Captain Park, daughter of the communications officer who had served with Admiral Chen decades ago. Most of them are in bad shape, but they can travel. Elena's jaw tightened. The Nexari had been systematically arresting humans throughout their territory for the past year, claiming they were security risks and potential terrorists. The truth was that the humans were being held as hostages, leveraged to try to force the human alliance to stop their attacks. It was not working. If anything, it was making the humans more determined to bring down the coalition. Every captured human, every disappeared family, every restriction placed on human communities just added fuel to the fire that had been burning since the Great Abandonment. All teams, execute in 30 seconds, Elena ordered. She pulled herself through the ventilation shaft until she reached the main computer core. The Nexari were proud of their advanced technology, but they had designed their systems assuming that intruders would use conventional methods. They never expected someone to crawl through the air ducts and attack their computers from the inside. Elena attached her hacking device to the main data terminal and activated the program that her team's tech specialist had designed. Within seconds, she had access to the entire Nexari research database. Files began copying to her storage unit: weapons research, ship design, strategic plans, and most importantly, complete records of coalition military movements. Phoenix Team, light it up, she ordered. The explosion was small but precisely placed. The main power coupling overloaded, and the entire facility went dark except for emergency lighting. In the confusion that followed, her teams moved like shadows through the facility. Tiger Team, deploy the virus. Deploying now, Lieutenant Zhao responded. Should be spreading through their network in 3, 2, 1. Package delivered. Throughout the facility, computer screens began flickering and changing. Instead of Nexari technical displays, they now showed human faces. Admiral Chen making her final broadcast from Earth orbit. Children in refugee camps asking when the rescue ships would come. Bodies floating in space around the evacuation zones where coalition ships had refused to pick up survivors. But the most devastating images were the recent ones. Video footage taken by human agents in coalition space, showing the conditions in the restricted zones where humans were forced to live. Overcrowded housing blocks. Humans doing dangerous labor while aliens supervised from safe distances. Children separated from their parents and placed in education facilities where they were taught to be grateful for coalition generosity. Wolf Team, move out with the prisoners, Elena ordered. We've got maybe 10 minutes before their security forces figure out what's happening. The extraction went smoothly. Elena's teams had been doing this kind of operation for years, and they had learned from every mistake. They moved through the facility like they owned it, avoiding security checkpoints and using the chaos of the power failure to mask their movements. By the time Nexari security forces arrived at the communication array, the human teams were already back in their ships and jumping to hyperspace. All they left behind was a facility in chaos, computers displaying images of their crimes, and a message broadcast on all coalition frequencies. This is Colonel Elena Vasquez of the Human Liberation Front. Her voice echoed through coalition space. Today's operation recovered 23 human prisoners who were being held illegally by the Nexari government. We also acquired complete records of coalition research into biological weapons designed to target human genetic markers. The last part was not entirely true, but Elena knew it would cause panic in coalition leadership. The idea that humans had penetrated their most secure facilities and stolen their secret research would make them paranoid and suspicious of everyone around them. To all humans living under coalition control, she continued. We have not forgotten you. We will never stop fighting to bring you home. To the coalition leadership, this is what happens when you break your promises and abandon innocent people to die. Every crime you commit against humanity will be answered. Every lie you tell will be exposed. Every human you hurt will be avenged. The broadcast ended, but Elena knew the real damage was just beginning. Within hours, the images and videos from the Nexari facility would be spreading across the coalition's communication networks. Human hackers embedded in dozens of systems would ensure that the files could not be deleted or blocked. Elena's ship, the Shadowhawk, rendezvoused with the rest of her squadron at a hidden base in the Tau Ceti system. The base was built inside a massive asteroid that had been hollowed out and converted into a shipyard and training facility. Hundreds of humans and their alien allies worked around the clock building new ships and planning operations against Coalition targets. "How did it go?" asked Admiral Torres as Elena reported to the command center. "Better than expected," she replied, handing him a data chip containing the stolen Nexari files. "We got everyone out and we left them a message they won't forget. Plus, we now have complete schematics for their new battleship designs and their patrol schedules for the next 6 months." Torres nodded with satisfaction. The information would be invaluable for planning future operations. But more importantly, it would help them protect human populations in Coalition space by predicting where security crackdowns were likely to occur. "Sir," said Communications Officer Park, "we're receiving reports from human cells throughout Coalition territory. The virus Elena's team deployed has spread to over 40 systems. Coalition authorities are trying to shut down their networks, but our people keep finding new ways to get the images through." Torres smiled. This was the real genius of their strategy. They were not just fighting a military war against the Coalition. They were fighting an information war, forcing the galaxy to see the truth about what the Coalition had done and continued to do to humanity. "What's the reaction been like?" he asked. "Mixed," Park replied. "Coalition member species are demanding explanations. Some are calling for investigations into the treatment of human populations. The Etherian Council is in emergency session. There have been protests on a dozen worlds. And the Coalition leadership? Full panic mode. They're restricting communication networks, increasing security at all major facilities, and pulling ships back from the frontier to protect core systems." Torres nodded. Fear was making the Coalition do exactly what humanity wanted them to do. By pulling their ships back to protect important targets, they were creating gaps in their patrol coverage that human raiders could exploit. By restricting communications, they were making it harder for their own forces to coordinate responses to attacks. "Sir," said another communications officer, "Admiral Chen is requesting a secure channel conference with all squadron commanders." The main screen activated, showing Chen aboard her flagship along with a dozen other human commanders from across the galaxy. Elena recognized most of them. Captain Rodriguez, who specialized in attacking Vorthon military convoys. Captain Kim, whose teams had been sabotaging Etherian research stations. And Captain Hayes, who led the operations to extract human populations from Coalition labor camps. "Ladies and gentlemen," Chen began, "today marks a turning point in our campaign. For the first time since the Great Abandonment, the Coalition is truly afraid of us. Their security forces are stretched thin. Their member species are questioning their leadership, and their own propaganda is being turned against them." She gestured to a tactical display showing Coalition space. Red markers indicated successful human operations over the past month. There were dozens of them, scattered across the entire Coalition territory. "But fear makes people dangerous," Chen continued. "Our intelligence sources indicate that the Coalition is planning a major offensive against our bases and allied species. They're calling it Operation Klee." Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the blue-white star of the Nexari home system grow larger on the view screen. Her hair was completely gray now, and her face bore the scars of 30 years of warfare, but her eyes still burned with the same determination that had driven her since the day the Coalition abandoned humanity to die. "Fleet status. Report," she ordered. "All ships in position," replied Captain Torres, her longtime friend and now fleet coordinator. "Stealth systems are operating perfectly. Coalition sensors are reading us as space debris and background radiation." Chen smiled with satisfaction. The stealth technology was one of humanity's greatest achievements, developed from studying Coalition sensor systems during decades of raiding operations. Human ships could now move through Coalition space like ghosts, invisible until they chose to reveal themselves. "Any word from our strike teams?" she asked. "Elena's team has successfully infiltrated Nexari Prime," Torres reported. "Rodriguez is in position at the Etherian homeworld. Kim's people have reached the Vorthon military complex. All teams report ready to execute." Chen nodded. Today would be the culmination of everything humanity had worked toward since the Great Abandonment. Not conquest or destruction, but something far more devastating to the Coalition. The complete exposure of their crimes to their own people. Open a channel to all ships, Chen ordered. This is Admiral Chen speaking. Today we return to the worlds that abandoned us. But we do not come as conquerors. We come as witnesses. We come to tell the truth. Throughout the hidden human fleet, soldiers and officers who had grown up in asteroid bases and salvage ships prepared for the most important mission of their lives. Many of them had been children when the Coalition left Earth to die. Now they were adults with children of their own, and they were determined that no species would ever again face abandonment alone. Begin the operation, Chen ordered. Across Coalition space, human strike teams that had been positioned for weeks suddenly activated. On Nexari Prime, Colonel Elena Vasquez led her team through maintenance tunnels beneath the planet's capital city. Her destination was the Central Broadcasting Complex, the hub that controlled all communication networks across Nexari space. "Security checkpoint ahead," whispered Sergeant Mills, who was scouting ahead through the tunnel system. "How many guards?" Elena asked. 6 Nexari standard patrol. They're not expecting trouble." Elena smiled grimly. That was the Coalition's greatest weakness. After 30 years of believing their own propaganda, they had convinced themselves that humans were just savage pirates hiding in dead systems. They could not imagine that the feral remnants were capable of sophisticated operations deep in Coalition territory. "Take them quietly," Elena ordered. "We need their access codes." Her team moved like shadows through the underground complex. Years of training in zero-gravity and hostile environments had made them incredibly skilled at moving silently and striking without warning. The Nexari guards never knew what hit them. Within minutes, Elena's team had control of the broadcasting center. While her technical specialists began uploading their prepared programs to the communication network, Elena activated her personal transmitter. "Phoenix Base, this is Phoenix Leader," she said. "Package is being delivered." Throughout Coalition space, similar reports came in from other strike teams. Human agents who had been infiltrating Coalition systems for years suddenly revealed themselves, taking control of communication networks, data storage facilities, and government buildings. On the Etherian homeworld, Captain Rodriguez and his team had seized the planet's main data archive, where the Etherian government stored all their official records. The graceful, silver-skinned beings who prided themselves on their civilization and culture were about to learn some uncomfortable truths about their leaders. At the Vorthan military complex, Captain Kim's team had penetrated the Empire's most secure facility and gained access to their strategic planning computers. The proud warrior race that claimed to protect the weak was about to face evidence of their own cowardice. "All teams report successful infiltration," Torres announced from the Defiance's bridge. "Ready to begin broadcast on your command." Chen took a deep breath. For 30 years, she had dreamed of this moment. The chance to force the galaxy to see the truth about what the Coalition had done. The chance to make them understand that the 30 million humans who died on Earth had not been forgotten. "Begin transmission," she ordered. Across Coalition space, every screen, every communication device, every public display suddenly changed. Instead of regular programming or government announcements, they began showing images that most Coalition citizens had never seen before. The first image was of Earth in its final days. Brown clouds covering the continents, gray oceans under a poisoned sky, refugee camps filled with humans waiting for rescue ships that would never come. Then came the footage that the Coalition had tried to hide for 30 years. Security recordings from the evacuation ships, showing Coalition officers discussing which humans were worth saving and which could be written off. Audio, files of Etherian diplomats laughing about human emotional instability. Nexarii, calculations showing that it would be more efficient to let humans die than to provide them with adequate transportation. But the most devastating evidence was what came next. Current footage from Coalition space, showing how humans who had been rescued were actually living. The overcrowded housing blocks where human families were forced to live 10 people to a room. The dangerous industrial jobs where humans did work too hazardous for aliens. The education centers where human children were taught that they should be grateful for Coalition generosity. Citizens of the Coalition, Admiral Chen's voice echoed across dozens of star systems. "For 30 years, your leaders have told you that humanity chose to stay on their dying world. This is the truth. We begged for help, and you left us to suffocate. On Nixari Prime, Elena watched as crowds of aliens gathered around public screens, staring in shock at the images being broadcast. Many of them had never known the full truth about the human evacuation. They had been told that it was completed successfully, that all humans had been saved. Your leaders told you that humans were too primitive to join civilized society, Chen continued. But we learned to survive in the void between stars. We learned to build ships from scrap metal and hope. We learned to live in places where your technology fails and your courage abandons you. The broadcast continued for hours, showing evidence of coalition crimes that went far beyond the abandonment of humanity. Records of species enslaved for their resources. Entire worlds depopulated so their planets could be mined. Primitive civilizations destroyed because they occupied valuable territory. The coalition claims to represent civilization, Chen said. But what kind of civilization abandons children to die? What kind of civilization enslaves the weak and exploits the helpless? What kind of civilization builds its prosperity on the suffering of others? Elena's team finished their work at the broadcasting center and began their extraction. As they moved through the city streets, Elena could see the impact of their operation. Groups of Nexari stood in the streets arguing about what they had just seen. Some demanded that their government explain the evidence. Others called for investigations into their leaders' actions. Similar scenes were playing out across coalition space. On the Etherian homeworld, crowds of the graceful aliens gathered outside government buildings, demanding answers about their leaders' role in the human abandonment. At the Vorthon military complex, warrior caste officers questioned orders that they had followed without thinking for decades. Admiral, Torres reported from the Defiance, we're receiving communications from coalition defense forces. They're demanding that we surrender and stand down. Chen laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Tell them we'll consider it. Right after they explained to their people why 30 million humans had to die for coalition convenience. The response came quickly. Coalition battle fleets began moving toward the systems where human broadcasts were originating. But they faced a problem they had never encountered before. The broadcasts were coming from everywhere at once. Human agents embedded throughout coalition space had created a network that could not be shut down by attacking a single point. Admiral, Elena's voice came over the communication system. Phoenix team reporting successful extraction from Nixari Prime. We're seeing massive civil unrest in the capital. Nexari citizens are demanding their government's resignation. Tiger team reporting from the Etherian homeworld, came Captain Rodriguez's voice. Government buildings are surrounded by protesters. The Etherian Council has locked itself in the capital complex and is refusing to answer questions about the evidence we broadcast. Wolf team at the Vorthon complex reported Captain Kim. Half, the Vorthon military command has resigned in protest. The other half is trying to organize a response, but their officers are refusing to follow orders until they get explanations about the human abandonment. Chen felt a surge of satisfaction. This was exactly what she had hoped for. The coalition was not just facing a military threat. They were facing a political crisis that threatened to tear their entire alliance apart. Sir, Torres said quietly, our long-range sensors are detecting massive fleet movements. The coalition is mobilizing everything they have. Hundreds of us, the great assembly hall of the former coalition capital world, had not seen such a gathering in over a century. Representatives from dozens of species filled the vast chamber, their voices creating a cacophony of different languages and dialects. But today, for the first time in 30 years, humans were not the ones being judged. Admiral Sarah Chen walked slowly down the central aisle, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence that fell over the assembly. At 78 years old, she moved with the careful dignity of someone who had survived 3 decades of warfare, but her eyes still burned with the determination that had driven her since the day the coalition abandoned humanity to die. Behind her walked representatives of 47 different species. Humans, yes, but also Zephyrians, Krill, Altarians, Vakari, and dozens of others. All of them species that the coalition had deemed unworthy at one time or another. All of them now united in something the galaxy had never seen before. An alliance built on mutual respect rather than fear. At the center of the Great Hall, the former coalition leadership sat in what had once been seats of honor. The elegant Etherian Prime Minister, her silver skin now dull with shame, the calculating Nexari director, his cybernetic implants sparking with nervous energy. The proud Vorthan war marshal, his ceremonial armor stripped of its decorations. Chen stopped before them and placed a datapad on the speaker's podium. The device contained 30 years of evidence, recordings of coalition crimes, documentation of species enslaved and abandoned, and most importantly, the complete records of the great abandonment that had started it all. Honored representatives, Chen began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. We are here today not to pass judgment, but to offer something that the coalition never gave to us, a choice. The Etherian Prime Minister shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Admiral Chen, surely you understand that the decisions made regarding Earth's evacuation were based on practical considerations. Resources were limited and difficult choices had to be made. Chen's expression did not change. Prime Minister, 30 million people died because you decided they were not worth saving. Children suffocated in poisoned air while your ships flew away with empty cargo holds. Please do not insult our intelligence by calling that a practical consideration. Murmurs rippled through the assembly hall. Many of the coalition species had only learned the full truth about the human abandonment in the past months, when human hackers had broadcast the evidence across the galaxy. The carefully edited version of events that their leaders had told them was very different from the reality. What do you want from us? Asked the Nexari director, his synthesized voice flat and emotionless. Reparations, territorial concessions, public executions of our leadership? Chen smiled, and it was not the expression the coalition leaders had expected. Director, if we wanted those things, we would have taken them. We have been inside your most secure facilities. We have seen your defensive plans. We know exactly how weak you really are when you cannot abandon others to do your fighting for you. She gestured to the representatives seated throughout the hall. What we want is what we have been building for 30 years. A galaxy where no species has to face extinction alone. A civilization based on cooperation rather than exploitation. A future where strength is measured not by how many others you can dominate, but by how many you can lift up. The Vorthan war marshal leaned forward aggressively. You speak of cooperation, but you come here with weapons and threats. Your raiders have attacked our shipping, destroyed our facilities, killed our people. How is that cooperation? Colonel Elena Vasquez, now wearing the uniform of a general in the new Galactic Alliance, stepped forward. At 50 years old, she represented the generation that had grown up in the asteroid bases and salvage ships, shaped by the abandonment but not broken by it. Marshal, she said quietly, every human who died in your attacks chose to be there. Every operation we conducted was against military or strategic targets. When did we ever abandon civilians to die? When did we ever leave children to suffocate while we flew away in ships with room to save them? The war marshal fell silent. That was the difference between the human campaign and typical coalition warfare. Humans fought with precision and purpose not because they enjoyed violence, but because they remembered what it felt like to be helpless. Chen activated the datapad, and holographic displays appeared throughout the hall. Images of the new alliance that humanity had been building. Space stations where dozens of species worked together on equal terms. Colonies where children of different races played together without fear. Ships crewed by mixed crews who judged each other by skill and character rather than species. This is what we have built while you spent 30 years congratulating yourselves on your civilization, Chen announced. Worlds where the Zephyrians share their mining technology freely. Systems where the Krill use their engineering skills to help others rather than being enslaved for them. Colonies where species you deemed primitive have created innovations that surpass your greatest achievements. The images continued to cycle through scenes of cooperation and progress. The Altarians, freed from coalition relocation, had developed new medical technologies that had saved millions of lives. The Vakari, no longer forced to build ships for their conquerors, had designed vessels that could travel faster and safer than anything in the coalition fleet. But this is not why we are here today, Chen continued. We are here to offer you something that your leadership never offered to us. A chance to join something better. The Etherian Prime Minister looked confused. You are offering us membership in your alliance? After everything that has happened? Not your leadership, Chen said firmly. Your people. Every species in this galaxy deserves the chance to be part of something better than the coalition. But they have to choose it freely, without coercion or abandonment as the alternative. She gestured to another holographic display, this one showing a new star chart. Systems throughout the galaxy were marked with different colors. blue for alliance members, red for coalition holdouts, and green for worlds that had chosen independence. Over the past year, 43 coalition member species have held referendums on their future, Chen announced. 27 have chosen to join our alliance. 12 have chosen independence. 4 have remained loyal to the coalition government. The numbers were devastating to coalition leadership. In a single year, their mighty alliance had shrunk from over 100 member species to less than 20. And the trend was accelerating as more worlds learned the truth about coalition policies. "This is impossible," protested the Nexari director. "Our member species are bound by treaties, by agreements that cannot simply be dissolved by popular vote." General Vasquez stepped forward again. "Director, those treaties were signed by governments that lied to their people about what the coalition really was. Treaties based on deception have no moral authority." Chen nodded approvingly. Elena understood the deeper principle at work here. This was not about revenge or conquest. It was about giving every species the right to choose their own future, without fear of abandonment or retaliation. "Your former member species are not prisoners," Chen continued. "They are partners who decided they wanted something better than an alliance built on exploitation and fear. They wanted to be part of something where their children would never have to worry about being deemed unworthy if they became inconvenient." The coalition leaders sat in stunned silence as the full scope of their defeat became clear. They had not lost a war in the traditional sense. They had lost something far more important: the trust and support of their own people. "What happens to us?" asked the Etherian Prime Minister quietly. Chen's expression softened slightly. "That depends on you. The Galactic Alliance believes in justice, but also in redemption. Those responsible for the worst crimes will face trial. But your people will have the chance to choose new leaders and apply for membership in the Alliance." She paused, looking directly at each of the former coalition leaders. "The choice you denied to 30 million humans, we are offering to billions of your citizens. The right to decide their own future." The Vorthan War Marshal stood slowly, his hand moving toward his ceremonial weapon. For a moment the entire hall tensed, expecting violence, but instead of drawing his sword he unbuckled it and placed it on the floor. "I have served the Vorthan Empire for 60 years, he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "I believed we were protecting the weak and maintaining order. I was wrong. The humans have shown us what real strength looks like, and what real protection means." One by one, the other coalition leaders followed his example. The Etherian Prime Minister removed her badge of office. The Nexari director disconnected his command implants. They were not just surrendering their authority. They were acknowledging that their entire way of thinking had been wrong. Chen felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness as she watched the formal end of the coalition. This was what she had worked toward for 30 years. But it was not a moment of triumph. Too many people had died for there to be any celebration. The Galactic All,